Thank you very much. We'll read the scriptures. 2 Kings chapter 4. Second Kings chapter 4 verse 8. We'll read from verse 8. And it fell on a day that Elijah passed to Shunem, where was a great woman, and she constrained him to eat bread. And so it was that as oft as he passed by, he turned in thither to eat bread. And she said unto her husband, Behold now, I perceive that this is an holy man of God, which passeth by us continually. Let us make a little chamber, I pray thee, on the wall, and let us set for him there a bed, and a table, and a stool, and a candlestick. And it shall be, when he cometh to us, and he shall turn in thither. And it fell on a day that he came thither, and he turned into the chamber, and lay there. And he said to Gehazi, his servant, Call this Shunammite. And when he had called her, she stood before him. And he said unto him, Say now unto her, Behold, thou hast been careful for us with all this care. What is to be done for thee? Wouldst thou be spoken for to the king, or to the captain of the host? And she answered, I dwell among mine own people. And he said, What then is to be done for her? And Gehazi answered, Verily she hath no child, and her husband is old. And he said, Call her. And when he had called her, she stood in the door. And she said, About this season, according to the time of life, thou shalt embrace a son. And she said, Nay, my lord, thou man of God, do not lie unto thine handmaid. And when the woman conceived and bare a son at that season that Elisha had said unto her, according to the time of life. And when the child was grown, it fell on a day that he went out to his father to the reapers. And he said unto his father, My head, my head. And he said to a lad, Carry him to his mother. And when he had taken him, he brought him to his mother. He sat on her knees till noon, and then died. And when she went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God, and shut the door upon him, and went out. And she called unto her husband, and said, Send me, I pray thee, one of the young men, and one of the asses, that I may run to the man of God and come again. Read up to verse 22. The stories in the Bible is not just a story, but it depicts the word of life. And one day I thought about it. And this Shunammite's husband, this husband told her, Hey honey, I think you're a bit too much. If I was 40 or 50 years, I would be fine, but I'm almost 60 years old. And you're telling me to build a chamber. I think you're a bit asking too much. And if I don't build this chamber, you're going to nag me continually, but I don't think how I can build a chamber. And I often have a conversation with my wife, and my wife is a woman. She wants it to be done as perfect as she wants it. So when we eat, she tells us to close the door. Yesterday, the air was clean, so we had the window open. And she was nagging me because I had the door open. If I ask my wife, a man cannot say every single thing about those little things. So even if it's done without the way I want it, I just really pass it on. And many brothers and sisters in my church say I'm always on on the side of the brothers. But actually, it's not. In Korea, the status of men are actually very humbled. And I was in Thailand and I was having this mind lecture. And I told them that I would turn the concepts of the Thailand upside down. Thailand is a kingdom of women. 88% of the national university is women. In university, you cannot see men. So Thailand, women prevail. They don't want a son, they want a daughter. So even in the families, it's women-centered. Now in Korea, I don't know about anywhere else, but in my household, women prevail. I mean, I'm standing at the podium so I can speak about this. If I go back home, I cannot speak a word about this. So I told my wife yesterday, well, you want everything perfectly done as you say. So that's the difference of men and women. So I see the Shunammite. Even her husband is old. And it's written in the scriptures that the husband is old. And she told her husband, the prophet is coming, so let's build a chamber. You have to cut the woods. You have to have the pillar. You have to have the roof. You have to carve the wood. And the husband has to do it all alone. In the Bible, it's very simple. And she said unto her husband, Behold, now I perceive that this is a holy man of God, which passeth by continually. Let us make a little chamber, I pray thee, on the wall, and let us set it for him there a bed, and a table, and a stool, and a candlestick. And it shall be, when he cometh to us, it shall turn in thither. So it's very simple. But think about it, an old man making a table, a bed, a chamber. This would not have been easy. But you cannot blame the woman, because when I think about it, if I were the husband, maybe I would have said, "You do it. I'm too old. I cannot build a chamber. Honey, I'm sorry, but I wanna live by you maybe 2 or 3 more years. But if I build this chamber, I might die." Well, the Bible doesn't say a word about it. This woman serves God. So this was not a simple task. It's not an easy task. Even though the husband was old, he built the chamber. It's not just simply building houses out of chopsticks, right? You have to have the furniture. You don't buy it in this age. You have to have a stool, a candlestick. You have to build it by yourself. Well, the Bible doesn't say a single thing about the husband's word. Maybe this husband is not like me. He was very nice person. Not really sure if he muttered or complained or not, but the Bible doesn't say anything about that. He had the job done. For us in our hearts, we have times where we live without Jesus in our hearts. For me, I tell you a lot of stories about my life. And the first day I moved to Padong, where this unforgettable neighborhood, and um, I inhaled this charcoal gas. And there were brothers and sisters in the church, and it was the pastor was moving. I was moving, but the brothers and sisters didn't come to help, as far as I remember. So I was very tired. So I was very tired that night. So I stopped. And in the middle of night, my daughter Eun-suk, she was crying so loud. So I woke up. And I woke up and I was frustrated. Hey, honey, why is she crying? My wife said, oh, why? I don't know why she's crying. Come on, honey, let's go back to sleep. And we went back to sleep. And then time passed. And my daughter started crying so loud. We got up and I was really angry. I think very seriously of my sleeping time because I have to rest, and I can hardly remember waking up in the middle of the night. So I said, "Honey, why do you keep? Why are you making our daughter crying?" So she turned out the lights. And she looked at her, but there was no problem. So my wife stood up, and she said she was going to the bathroom. So at that time, there was a room, and you have to go outside to go to the bathroom. And as she opened the door, the cold air came in, and she just fell down to the floor. And I thought, oh, this is carbon monoxide poisoning. So if you're poisoned by carbon monoxide, as soon as you meet cold air, you become unconscious. So I pushed our daughter to the door, and I was afraid I might become unconscious. And I screamed. I screamed, help, help, and the neighbors came. And the neighbor said, "Oh, what's happening?" I'm sorry to wake you in the middle of the night, but I think we got carbon monoxide poisoning." So they took us some blankets and they made a room, and then they prepared all these things for us. So we spent the night there. At that time, there were many people who died of carbon monoxide poisoning. I was supposed to be dead that night. But I really think my son and my daughter is very precious, our children. So on the day my son was born, we didn't have anything to eat. But because our son was born, we could have breakfast that day. And if my daughter didn't wake me up in that middle of the night, we would have been all dead that night. So as I look back on my life, and there are stories that God protected us from these dangers and threats. And I was in Apgokdong, this neighborhood. I thought I was going to starve to death. And I was in Jangpalli. I thought I might freeze to death at night. And at the night, it was so cold. I was afraid to go to sleep. So when service ends, I would ask the brothers to sleep over. But none of the brothers want to sleep at the church because it was cold. And they all went back home. And I was alone. I was thinking, if I freeze to death, and there was a sister. She was 16 years old, and she sometimes sends kimchi. Maybe Sunju. I would imagine in Sunju she would come to bring kimchi, and then when she finds out I'm dead, she'd be crying. That was so sad. I was so afraid. And the next morning, I went to the creek to wash up, and there was this creek, and it was frozen. And then I was washing our hands and my face, and beneath the ice, there were little fish that was swimming there. And these fish, God created these fish too. And God keeps the fish alive, and He would protect me from dying, so I could be freed from that fear. And then another thing, I was thankful to God, and I had this ulcer, stomach ulcer, and I took medication. And my stomach was so comfortable. Before, even if I drink water, I had a stomach ache. But after a week, I took the medication. It was the same as if I didn't. So, didn't mean that much. So that night, I prayed to God, and within 24 hours, the stomach ulcer has been cured. My stomach was weak, so I couldn't have flour, I couldn't have sour food. But since then, my stomach is all clean now. When I was in the military, we were going through this special training week, and there was this special PT exercise. And we have these trading yards. We drank this. We filled this water canteens of 1 liters, and we drank 8 or 9 canteens a day because we sweat that much. And also, we had this handful of salt every morning because we sweat so much. The sodium all goes out. So I had a weak heart. So even ever since I was young, and I was doing this PT exercise, and I was feeling as if I was being paralyzed. So I realized that my heart was not that strong. I was in my 20s that year, so it passed. But when I reached my 50s, my stomach, my heart has been a very big problem. I went to the Hanyang University Hospital, and they had me analyzed, and we went through all these tests. They couldn't find why. And I would listen to my heart, and it would stop beating for a second. So if my heart doesn't start beating again, I would die. That was 97, 98, 99. So I think it was 99. We were building this center, the mission center in Daejeon, and my heart was so weak. in 1999 August, and I had faith that God cured my heart, and I started jogging. And it was a West Daejeon girls' middle school, and then I started jogging, running. I started 1 kilometer, 3 kilometers, 5 kilometers, and from that day, my heart became strong. So looking back in my life, there has been many. I've been in dangers, and I came to Seoul, and then I was prosecuted. And it was the biggest case in Jeonju court. But every single time, God was on my side, and He protected me, and He helped me. How can you put a price on that? I had carbon monoxide poisoning. If my daughter didn't cry the second time, all three of us would have been dead. There have been many dangers, there have been many difficulties. But God was with me. God stood side by side and He protected me. What I'm so sorry is people risk their relationship with God because of money. What's so good about worldly happiness and the worldly satisfactions? How foolish are them? What is honor? What is fame in front of God? People cannot influence you. People cannot impact you. However, they lie and they deceive each other. And it's so pitiful. So not long ago, in the United States, we had the CLF. And my son, he was leading the gathering. And it started in America. And there are not many people who can speak English. And there were people saying, Pastor Park put his son to this very prestigious position. And I laughed because my son, nowadays there are a lot of rumors going around. If God didn't put my son in that position, there's nothing that makes my son miserable than that. If God didn't exalt him, but I put him there, that would be a highway to destruction. People don't think of God that much because you cannot see it with your eyes. You don't know what kind of person God is. This Shunem woman, her husband was old. She didn't have a son, she didn't have a child. She just lived with her husband. And this man of God, Elisha, so Elisha was on a tour from city to city, and he would preach and teach about God. So Elisha passed to Shunem, and there was this great woman. She brought Elisha to her house and treated him with food. And then when it was night, so they didn't have a room, so Elisha couldn't stay. But this great woman of Shunem, she was so grateful that Elisha came to her house and could share the food. And after they had the food, they preached the word. And if Elisha could stay in the house, and if God could work in our house too, how wonderful would that be? The Shunammite thought. But her husband was so old, and they didn't have a spare room. So this Shunammite woman, and she wanted for Elisha to stay. So that's why she told her husband, I perceive that this is a holy man of God, which passeth by us continually. Let us make a little chamber, a privy on the wall, and let us set for him there a bed, and a table, and a stool, and a candlestick. And it shall be, when he cometh to us, that he shall turn in thither. And in verse 11 it says, but it fell on a day that he came thither, and he turned into the chamber and lay there. So the chamber was built, the bed was there, the table, stool, candlestick, everything was made. So this is the room in our hearts. In our hearts, in the rooms, it is filled with our desires and our pleasures. The Jesus who is in our hearts, he cannot stay comfortable in our hearts because we do not think of Jesus and we do not treat Jesus. We just live according to our worldly pleasures. And I thought about it. The Puritans of England came to the New World, America, because of persecution from the kingdom. And they were building a building. And what the people passing by asked? Hey, there's strong wind, and there are animals here. So we're building a house for the children. And the people said, hey, brother, we are in a far land from home. We cannot survive without the help of God. Stop building your house. It is true that our children, we have to protect our children from the wind and the animals. However, but what we first do is build the house of God. Let's build a church, a chapel. And let's build a school. And then next we shall build our houses. So the ancestors of the United States, they put God before their needs. And I was born again in 1962. In 1962, there were missionaries, 520 missionaries that came from United States to Korea. And there were 520 missionaries that were in Korea preaching the gospel. And I imagine maybe tens of thousands of missionaries were all over the world. And by the end of the 18th century, Christianity missionaries came to the Asia. And the Puritans were persecuted, and then they settled in America, and they built churches, roads, schools. And because of this danger, even though there was a danger in animals, they built churches and schools before they built their houses. And they were building an Empire State Building, and they built a 102-story building in 13 months. And when they built it, there was no one who were willing to go into the Empire State Building because this was built so fast. And then there was a plane. It was fogged, and then it crashed into the state building. But the Empire State Building stood firm. And when we build churches, it's really difficult to build one story in 1 month. You have to have the foundation as cement, and building one story in a month is difficult. And then this Empire State Building, think about it. It's 102 stories high. They built the building in 13 months. It's a miracle. And the people didn't have the equipment and everything. The people in America at that time, they had the wisdom this world did not have. And all the other people were surprised. And I have the mind lectures in other countries, and I speak about the stories in Korea. Korea, and we say we had petroleum products. So even though we don't have oil, crude oil in Korea, and if you go to the States, the gasoline in America and the gasoline in Korea, the quality is different. At first, I had this car, and when we go to the gas stations, he always put premium gasoline, but I told him not to. I mean, because the car doesn't complain about which kind of gasoline it takes. Because the gasoline is 95% gasoline. So the regular gasoline here in Korea is actually a premium gasoline in America. I mean, Korea doesn't have a drop of crude oil. However, we process it and we make it into petroleum products. And back ago, we couldn't build a high-speed train. So we had to import the technology from French. And the Europeans say don't sell any products to Korea because Korea would make better products in 6 months. I know it well. Before 1988, before we had the Olympics, Korea was so poor. We didn't allow people to have passports. In 1989, President Roh-tae-woo, it was March of 1989, He said to the people above the age of 45, they were allowed to make passports. So immediately I went to the district office and I applied for a passport, and I went to the U.S. Embassy to get a visa. And people say it's very difficult, and we went, and they asked, "Are you a couple?" Yes, we are a couple. Are you two going together? Yes, we're going to. Congratulations, have a nice trip. And we had the visa right away. And in March 1989, we went to America. At first, we were confused. So we thought the Pacific Ocean, the closest was Los Angeles. And at first, the airplane didn't go straight. It was going and goes around the North Pole because the distance is shorter. In 1989, March, after I'd been to the United States, from that on, we started sending missionaries all over the world. And to all the people, to decent pastors, I sent them everyone to overseas. And I looked at this statistics. In 1989, we were so poor we couldn't even have passports. But starting from then, so it's been about 30 years, right? In 30 years, in 3 decades, the economy of Korea has grown rapidly. And this was unprecedented. So our land, Korea land, is 220 square kilometers. And up to 70 and 50 to 60% of our landscape is mountains. So you have to build chapels, schools, factories. We have to farms. We have to have these cucumbers. So we have so little land, so our land is expensive. So I tell the pastors, and there were 84,000 pastors that we have to train. So we were looking for land. We went to Jeju Island, and it was so expensive. But we went to Springfield, and the land is so big. But we had a price 1/3 of the price in Jeju. So we had 3,000 pyong. And if we build a building, we can have a facility there. We can train 1,000 people a month. But that's not the problem. Many pastors say, "Hey, pastor, we came to Korea. There are so many pastors who can't afford a plane ticket. They say, we'll build a building for you. Come to our country and train us." So we'll start from Springfield. So we have this rice cooking machines. And even in our church, we have those machines. So we bought 8 of these huge rice cooking machines, and we sent 6 to Springfield, and we sent 2 to New York. And they were so happy about this.
그릇들 사고 막
And they
옮겨가고
bought these
바다에
bowls, dishes.
내가 바닥에 그 카페트 난 카페트 참 싫어해요.
So I don't like carpets. It's really hard to clean up.
장으로 다 갈아라 그랬어요.
So I told them to get rid of the
아니
carpets.
그 위에 대만 그 위에 괜찮다 말짱 그랬지. 다 이제 그거 하고 뭐 요즘 전기 방송 시설하고 밥
And we have to set up the electricity
이런 일을
and the
하면
broadcasting system, and there's a lot to be done. And I think I'm doing all this work, and it seems like I'm dreaming.
생각해 보면
I can imagine the pastors receiving salvation there,
구원 받은 사람들이
and the people who receive salvation,
벗어나서 복음을 위해 살면
if they can come out of themselves and then they live for the gospel,
엄청난 일을 하는
Jesus will do amazing things with your life. I'm sorry to say this, but I think of all the pastors. In my free time, I do this. So I think of the pastors, and I compare them with me, and they were all better people than me. So I think one by one, I'm doing nothing, right? I put pastors here, I put pastors there, I put pastors over there.
지금 뭐 그런 일만 해요.
That's all I do.
살짝 쏙 들여다보고
And I look into the pastors, and I read their minds.
제가 봤을 때 내 양심의 소리
When I see their pastors, when I see these pastors of our mission, all the pastors are better people than me.
그들이 다 예수님을 위해 살았더라면
If they have lived for Jesus,
수넴에 있는 여자가
just like the Shunammite woman,
단둘이 늙은 부부가 사는데
she was living alone with her husband.
약한 거 알았겠지.
She knew that the husband is old.
남편 집 잘 못 짓는 거 알았겠지.
She knew that the husband cannot build a house.
무엇 때문에
But for what?
무엇 때문에 자기 남편 약한 거 부족한 거 알면서도
Even though she knew that she lacked and her husband is weak, why did she ask the husband, I pray on thee? We knew that this is a holy man of God. Let's build a chamber for him.
침상을 놓고 책상을 놓고
Let us set him there a bed, a table, and a stool, and a candlestick.
그분이 피곤하면 쉬시게 하고
If he is tired, let him rest.
낮이고 밤에 글 쓸 수 있도록 촛불 켜게
Day or night, we will allow him to write so we can have this candlestick.
드려보자.
Let's prepare food that he can eat.
그 하나님의 사람 우리나라를 일으키는 분인데
This holy man of God, he is a man who can save our country.
그분이 없으면 우리나라 죽는데 그분 위해서
Without him, we will be going to destruction. Let's serve him. Let's live for him.
알고
Even though the woman knew that the husband is old,
하지만
even though the husband cannot build this chamber,
성경을 읽어보니까
when you read the Bible, what Elisha said
넌 우리
when he came to
춤이라도
his house,
돈 많은
So had-
풍성히 사가지고
thou hast been careful for us with all this care.
건축에다 의뢰해가지고 설계가 탁탁하고 뭐 유리창 갖다 딱 뭐가 어려워요.
Well, if you hire someone to build a chamber, it's nothing
돈을 지어야 하고
because they didn't have the money. They had to build it by themselves, and it was difficult.
나무를 나르다가 다치기도 하고
And when they were cutting down the trees, the husband would get hurt.
근데 그들은 쉽게 아파트 분양 받아가지고 하나님 좀 도와주십시오 그게 아니에요.
However, they did not
돈이 있어서 좀 뭐죠 은행에 대출 받아가지고
They did not have the money, and they did not did it the easy way. They did not take a loan from the bank.
늙은
They were old. However,
나무 하나 제대로 베지 못하면서
they didn't have the strength,
나무 베서 깎아서
but they did
나가
build the
던져놓고
chamber.
그 나무 혼자 어떻게 날랐겠어요 늙은 사람이.
I mean, how did they cut down the woods, the trees? How did they move the trees?
아름다워.
But when I think about these two people building this chamber,
예수님이
it's so beautiful. This symbolizes us building a house, a chamber in our hearts for Jesus. Our hearts are filled with pleasure, desires, and lusts, and lies, and sins.
정말 예수님이 계시기에 불편함이 없는 죄가 없는 세계.
But Jesus has to stay
세계 없는 세계.
in a world where there is no shadows.
편함이 없도록 만들어 드리고 싶다.
We want to build a space where Jesus can rest at peace. So Elisha said,
네가 우리를 위해 이렇게 생각이 줍니다. 그냥
so thou hast been careful for us with all this care.
그냥 생각을 하고
They pondered,
뭐 남편에게 부탁을 하고
and the woman did not have the strength, so they built it with the husband.
선지자 엘리야가
So she persuaded the husband to build a chamber so that Elisha can stay there. They built a chamber, the bed,
책상을 만들고
the table, the stool, and the candlestick.
그래서 엘리사가 그 집에 와 있는 동안
So when Elisha stayed at that house,
풍랑을 잠재울 수 있고
all the difficulties they came,
저주를 물리칠
all the storms and the curses
두려움을
were cast away.
수가 있었다.
All the fear could be driven away from that house.
1962년
In 1962, October 7th, until that day, I was living in darkness. In 1962 October, I received forgiveness of sin. I was a person that was destined to go to hell, but it was as if I was dreaming. My sin has been forgiven. I wanted to scream, I've been forgiven.
나 죄 사함 받았어.
I received forgiveness of sin.
나 깨끗해.
I am clean. I'm holy.
주님이 내 안에 거하시기에
Now Jesus could dwell in me because my heart was cleansed with the blood. Oh, I am clean. I'm clean. Thank you, Jesus.
거룩해졌어요. 주님.
Lord, I am holy now.
주님 감사합니다.
Thank you, Lord.
이 복음 전하지 않
This gospel, I cannot help preach the gospel.
단하지 많고 많은 때지 있고
It's not easy.
어렵고
There are many difficulties.
배고
Even though it's cold, I'm starving.
같은 인간 위하여 피를 흘리셨고
But for a person like me, Jesus shed his blood.
같은 인간 위하여 생명을 버리셨고
For a person like me, Jesus has given away his life.
주가 되시기를
And he wants to be my Lord.
매일 성경을 읽어 주님과 만나니까
As I read the Bible every day and I meet with
내
Jesus,
마음 생각 안에
in my heart, in my thoughts, I didn't want to leave anything that would make Jesus uncomfortable.
매일 주님과 함께 주님 내 안에 계시니까
Because Jesus is with me,
내가 내 마음에 주님이 계시는데 어둠을 내 마음에 둘 수가 없어.
I cannot allow darkness in my house.
주님 내 안에 계시는데 내 마음 안에
Because Jesus is with me, I could not put desire, pleasure, lust, and I could not leave it in the room with Jesus.
그리고 60여 년이란 세월 거의 다 하나님.
So about almost 60 years have
주님하고 같이
passed.
있는 동안에
And as Jesus is with me,
어려워도
even though I fall into difficulties, I became sick, even though I'm sad or tired,
나는 몰라도 주님은 아셨고
Jesus already knew, and He protected me, and He saved me.
동생이
My brother,
나보다 4살 어린데
he's 4 years younger than me,
어릴 때부터 몸이 참
and he was very weak, even when he was little.
난 동생이 환갑까지만 살 수만 있으면 좋겠다.
And I wished my brother would live up to 60.
제 동생이 원래 72입니다.
And my brother is now 72 years old this year.
전에 작년인가
I think it was last year.
70대 노인들은 폐렴 아주 조심해야죠. 폐렴 잘못 다루면 아주 쉽게 죽는데. 제가 서울 생각해봤어요. 동생아, 너 죽어도 괜찮겠다. 너무 감사했어.
But I was so I was so thankful.
너무 감사했어.
I was so thankful because my brother was also saved.
오늘 오후부터 필리핀 갔다 오면
When I come back from Philippines,
새벽 오전 예배 마치고 바로 비행기 타고 LA 가서 LA 또 주일 예배라. 그렇게 시간이 그래 됩니다.
I'm going to Los Angeles.
뉴욕 가서 집회하고 그 다음에 독일 가서 집회하고.
I'm going to New York. I'm going to Germany. I'm going to Russia. We'll have these Bible seminars.
너무너무 신기한 것이
What's so amazing is
비행기를 너무 잘 타요.
I have no trouble
에스와티니 가는데
taking flights. I was going to Eswatini. I went to Hong Kong,
요하네스버그가 13시간
and from Hong Kong it was a 13-hour flight to Johannesburg.
작은 비행기 타고 에스와티니 들어가고.
From Johannesburg, I took a little plane to Eswatini.
좀 비행기 타면 피곤하게 이해가 안 가요.
And I cannot understand people who say it's very tiring
살아켜도 살 것 같아요.
to take flights. I can live my life, spend my whole life in the airplane. I mean, you don't have any cell signals, right?
저는 그런 사람이 아닌데
So I'm not a person who can do the work of God. However, God gave me His words, and He gave me health, and He opened up roads in front of me.
월요일 날 우리 교육 담당자들이
So on Monday,
들어갑니다. 가서 그쪽에 미주리주
we'll be flying
그리고 우리
to
학교
Springfield,
주정부 교육부하고 저희 합의하러 가고
and we will be negotiating with the state government. And we'll be starting a school there.
신학교를 하고
We'll have a middle, high school,
그런 생각을 가지고
theology school, and a music school there.
이 모든 것이
And all this
같은 마음으로 복음을 위해서 일하고 싶습니다. 또 그렇게 했고
would be the work of Jesus for the gospel. It has been like that since now, and I hope it'll be
수넴에 사는 귀한 여인
in the future. This great woman in
우리
Shunammite,
많이 했거나 마음이 착하거나 그렇다는 말 전혀 없었어요.
there's not a word about how smart she is, how beautiful she is,
수넴에 사는
or
모든 사람이
how
하나님의 손길이
good she
필요했고
is. However, the people that lived in Shunammite needed this woman. She knew that the Shunammite needs God's grace, and she knew that God's grace comes from the man of God.
하나님의 사람이 인물이 좋고 잘났거나 못났거나
No matter how the looks, how smart or dumb the holy man of God is,
수넴에 사는 귀한 여자에게는 정말
to this great woman of Shunammite, the man of God was a person who can save the Shunammite and deliver the word of gospel, the word of life. That's why she wanted to bring the man of God. Not sure if the brothers and sisters. Maybe she would have discussed it with the brothers and sisters in Shunem. But I think it didn't really work out. That's why she came to her husband and to build a chamber, to have a bed, a table, stool, and candlestick. So the prophet, the man of God, would stay there. And one day Elijah was thankful there. And it fell on a day, verse 11, that he came thither, and he turned into the chamber and lay there. And he said to Gehazi, his servant, call the Shunammite. And when he had called her, she stood before him. And he said unto him, say now unto her, behold, thou hast been careful for us with all this care. What is to be done for thee? Wouldst thou be spoken you for to the king or to the captain of the host? And she answered, I dwell among mine own people. And Elisha said, he will speak to the king or the captain of the host. But the Shunammite woman said, she answered, I dwell among mine own people. I'm satisfied. And he said, what then is to be done for her? And Gehazi answered, verily, she hath no child. And her husband is old. And Elisha called her again, and she stood in the door. And he said, about this season, according to the time of life, thou shalt embrace a son. This is like a dream come true. You will embrace a son. The woman was surprised. And she said, nay, my Lord, thou man of God, do not lie unto thine handmaid. But the woman conceived and bare a son. And that Elisha has said unto her according to the time of life. And next it says, the child was grown and fell on a day that he went out to his father to the reapers. And he said unto his father, my head, and he said to a lad, carry him to his mother. And when he had taken him and brought him to his mother, he sat on her knees till noon, and then died. And she went up and laid him on the bed of man of God, and shut the door upon him, and went out. This is so good. She laid the dead son on the bed of the man of God. This is telling her, this is your problem. If you want to stay here, you have to revive my son. My son is laying here. If you don't resurrect my son, you cannot lay on this bed. So the man of God resurrects the son. After that, there's the famine. And the king speaks to Gehazi. And spoke to the king about the Shunammite woman and the son. And he said, Gehazi says to the king, this is the Shunammite woman and the son. And she all returns. And the king grants the family of their land. so thankful to see God guiding them. Do not think of those you can see and those you can hold. Even though you cannot see it, God protects you. God takes care of you. God leads us carefully. Look upon God. Let's serve God. Let's live for God. And if we can receive the grace like the Shunammite woman, we can say we are the happiest people in earth. For the last years, as I've worked for God, God have opened up doors in front of me. It's so amazing. And I hope and I believe that God will work with us as we preach the gospel all over the world. So just like the Shunammite woman, just like she builds a chamber for Elisha, let's have Jesus in our hearts. Let's drive out the thoughts that goes against Jesus and drive out the desires that makes Jesus uncomfortable so that we can receive the help of Jesus. Just like the Shunammite woman, let's be blessed because of Jesus. Even though she has difficulties like her son dying, but let Jesus solve that. And you will live a happy and a blessed life. Thank you. Let us all pray.